Back to Ferguson, Missouri now. We now know of at least 5 people who say they saw Officer Darren Wilson shoot Michael Brown. But as Kyung Law reports, their stories aren't all the same.
Police shot this boy outside my apartment.
Seconds after Michael Brown was shot, witnesses from 3 different angles recording with wildly different accounts of that critical moment. This recording, audio from an unseen nearby man who says he saw Brown moving towards the officer.
Next thing I know, I'm thinking he started running, kept coming towards me.
But Brown did not run toward the officer, say 2 women who recorded from these 2 other angles.
He turns around, faces the officer, and puts his hands up, and the officer continues to shoot him until he goes down to the ground.
So while he was running away from the officer, trying to get away, he was getting shot at.
Who is telling the truth? Maybe everyone, or at least they believe they are.
Just because somebody tells you something with a lot of detail, just because they say it with confidence, just because they express it with emotion, it doesn't mean that it really happened that way.
Cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus says she's testified in 300 cases since 1975 and says over and over again eyewitnesses are often wrong. The Treyvon Martin case, one witness saw a black man with a hoodie on top of a white man, while another witness recalls a man with a white shirt on top of another. The 2002 D.C. sniper shootings, multiple witnesses described a white van or box truck. Police shut down freeways to frisk scores of van drivers. But the real car used? A blue Chevy 4-door sedan. The 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, Loftus testified in the criminal case and says a key eyewitness rented Timothy McVeigh the Ryder truck that carried the bombs used in the attack.
That Ryder truck employee remembered that McVeigh was with another person, and that there was now a mad hunt for John Doe number 2, but there was nobody with McVeigh the day he rented that Ryder truck.
That witness was not intentionally lying, says Loftus. Memory is flawed and affected by stress. When eyewitnesses become courtroom witnesses, flawed testimony leads to bigger problems.
The major cause of wrongful convictions is faulty eyewitness testimony. That's the major cause. And it's responsible in maybe about 3/4 of the cases.
As time grows from the shooting, witnesses might unknowingly shape and adopt their own memories of what happened based on what they see and hear in the media. Truth often only found in the evidence recovered. Kyung Law, CNN, Los Angeles.
This is kind of a big deal, so let's bring in our legal guys. Avery Friedman, a civil rights attorney and law professor, joining us from Cleveland today, and Richard Herman, a New York criminal defense attorney and law professor, who's joining us from Las Vegas today. Avery, I want to start with you. And we just heard about the witnesses and the varying accounts. One witness in one case can be heard telling police that he actually saw Brown come toward the officer. The other says he turned around, was running away, was shot. So we have different accounts. Will this be a problem if the case gets to trial?
Oh, if it gets to trial on it, it will be an enormous problem because, again, remember, the burden on the prosecution is to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. But remember, we're before a county grand jury. And while much has been made of the issue of the racial composition of the grand jury, the fact is the standard is quite low on the question of whether or not there is some basis for a claim against Officer Wilson, and that's what this grand jury, among other things, will be considering.
Richard, what do you make of these varying witness accounts?
Well, the varying witness accounts are going to play right into the defense hands here. You know, the great Yogi Berra coined the phrase deja vu all over again. And this looks from the early stages, and it's way too early to be definitive, but it looks like a Treyvon Martin all over again. Because the government has, as Avery said, has the burden of proof to prove here beyond a reasonable doubt their claims. And if you have conflicting eyewitness testimony, that means there's doubt. That means you can't believe everyone. Someone's wrong, someone's lying. It's going to lead to an acquittal here. And as harsh as that may sound, based on the result that happened here, it may very well be that the actions of the police officer were justified. And that's going to be the issue before the jury. Everything else is not going to matter. His actions justified.
The county jury.
Right.
Remember, we're going to have 2 grand juries. We're going to have federal and we're going to have state here. We're dealing right now with the county grand jury.
Exactly, and I want to bring up a point on that because there's been a lot of debate about whether the county prosecutor should stay in his role or not. In fact, we know thousands of people have signed petitions asking him to recuse himself from the case because his father, a police officer, was killed in the line of duty. I want you to listen to his response to those critics, and then we'll talk on the backside.
When I was 12 years old, you know, nobody said the policeman was killed in the line of duty tonight. No one said your father, the policeman, was killed tonight. All I know and all I heard was your father's not coming home. And I know what it was like to look back and watch my mother grow old and die without the man, the only man she ever loved, at her side. So I know the pain of that, and the fact that he was a police officer and killed in the line of duty had nothing to do with any of that. You know, what it did to me, and did it affect me? Absolutely affected me. And what it did for me is, or to me, was made me I think, a fierce advocate for victims of violence.
So, Richard, is a special prosecutor necessary, even just to eliminate perceptions of impartiality?
I don't believe so, Anna. I really do not. This gentleman has been serving office. He was voted in office by public. There's been no incidents or evidence whatsoever that he has any issues with respect to prosecuting this case. You open a floodgate of recusals every time a situation like this would come up again in the future. I think he's competent. I think the justice system has to take its course here. It's incredible to me that Attorney General Holder even came here to this environment. What? I don't know what the feds are doing there right now. Let the state go through their process. See if they can get an indictment here. See if they can do that. To bring federal civil rights charges, you have to prove an intentional, willful misconduct here on behalf of the officer. Based on what we've been hearing, there's no way they can possibly come close to that. There won't even be a murder. If he gets indicted, it will not be for murder. It will be for manslaughter, maybe. That's how it's going to come down.
Avery, you're shaking your head. Get in there.
Yeah, look, what goes on before a federal grand jury and what's involved in St. Louis County are apples and oranges. The fact is that a lot of factors will go into a federal grand jury, what kind of training, what kind of procedures the police use, what went on specifically in this case. I think there's some likelihood that you'll see a very different result coming from a federal grand jury. I just think they're two different worlds, that's all.
What about the fact that we have a grand jury at all?
And I don't think the county prosecutor should resign. I'm in accord with that.
Okay, so you both agree that he should stay put, but the fact that he even turned this over to a grand jury, was that a good idea? Some have said that that's just a stall tactic of sorts.
It's not a stall tactic. It's a proper procedure to give it to a grand jury here and to see if there's probable cause for the indictment. The grand jury will make a determination whether or not a crime was committed and whether it was more likely than not that the officer committed the crime. Well, we know he shot him. We know his bullets caused the death of this young man. We know that. But what we don't know is what led to that shooting, and that is the focus. That should be the tunnel vision for this particular case to see if it was justified.
Avery,
and turning it over to the grand jury is also advancing this concept of impartiality. I think that's the right thing to do rather than the county prosecutor handling it by himself. I think it's the appropriate, proper approach in dealing with this.
All right. Richard Herman and Avery Friedman, thanks so much.